I want to tell you how we got here today. It really began actually with PRSA's business case for public relations. And from that began a discussion that said, you know, this industry could really benefit from a codification of how do you do measurement. There have been endless discussions about what was good and what was bad, what's right and what's wrong, but there never really been a definitive moment in time where the measurement side of the PR world sort of got together, fortunately in this case in Barcelona, and said, okay, this is the fundamental, foundational principles of what we do. So back in June 2010, about 150 companies from around the world, many of them represented here today. Neil Gibson, for example, from FedEx was there. Mark Stevenson from Philips, his company was there as well. And a lot of the agencies and a lot of the measurement companies basically got together in Barcelona, people from 35 or so different countries, and voted and adopted 7 principles. And they're fairly simplistic. You know, they say things like, write goals before you measure. And that says, well, of course you should. The question is, do we actually do that? The measurement of business results is really where we're trying to get to. AVEs are a bad idea. Social media is important. They're all pretty simple stuff, but the reality is they had never been sort of ever put down and agreed to and if you will, formalized in any manner thus far. And so really what took place in Barcelona was not some tremendous earthquake in the world of measurement. It was simply a moment in time where the industry got its head together and said, okay, these are the things with which we are going to live by and go forward by. Now, they also reflected a very excellent partnership between PRSA and a group called AMEC. And AMEC is the other, if you will, sponsor or facilitator of this morning. AMEC stands for the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications, probably the longest name in public relations, and that's why we call it AMEC for short. It's really a trade association of measurement companies. And what AMEC and PRSA have now done together with, for example, Christina Darnowski of the PRSA staff really serving as the support to the AMEC chapter here in North America, for example, is really attempt to bring a level of rigor and a level of really codification, or this is how you do it, to measurement. And so today is really an outcome of that partnership. And it's really going to be a day where we focus on, so how do you apply these Barcelona principles? They all sound great, and actually they all sound pretty intuitive. The question is, so how do you actually measure social media? Principle 6 says you should measure it. The question is, well, how do you do it? If you get rid of AVEs, advertising value equivalents, what do you replace them with? And while we all go searching, you know, for the holy grail of we want to show the business benefits of public relations, mechanically, how do you actually do that? And so that's what today is about. It's the how-to. It's really the not big speeches about, you know, that we need to have more measurement in PR. It's really the mechanics of this is how you do it. And when we get to the end of today, what you'll have is a toolkit to take home with you that really brings this all together and hopefully is helpful to you as you go back to your day job going forward from here. One of the things that PRSA and AMEC have been talking about and focusing on is, you know, it's great for the measurement folks to get in a room in Barcelona or wherever and sort of agree to principles like this, and then how do you in turn apply them. But what's more important is that they actually reach into the world of the PR practitioner. That, in other words, we do have education or informational programs that really help the main body of public relation practitioners understand what this is all about. So if you're asked as a PR practitioner, so how are you going to show me the value of this budget you want me to give you? When the CMO of your company asks that question, you have an answer to that question, and that answer goes in and comes out of these principles. So that's really what today is all about. This is our agenda. We're going to have several sessions here up front, really beginning with Chris Foster of Booz Allen Hamilton, a great partner to AMEC, as well as PRSA, a member of them both. And I've asked Chris to sort of set the 30,000-foot level of where is measurement at today? What are people caring about, thinking about? What's the state? And from there, we're really going to drill down into each of those 7 principles. And again, each of them will be in that toolkit that we'll give you at the end here. I was asked by Judy Voss, who's of the PRSA staff and who who's really been a big help in pulling this together today to do two administrative things, and I promise not to only do this, well, just to do this once. Apparently, feedback this year, we'd love your feedback. We're going to decide at the end of this if we're ever going to do this again at future PRSA conferences. Would love to know what you thought, if that was a good idea. Apparently, this year feedback is not being done with pieces of paper on seats, but on prsa.org/feedback, and there's a specific form for this particular event. And then also, if you're going to be tweeting from here, which apparently some people do. I don't know, Holly, are you going to be tweeting? Clearly, constantly, okay. It's hashtag PRSAICON. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my good friend Chris Foster. Chris and I have had the pleasure of speaking together. This is the first time in the United States, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it was Hong Kong earlier this year, and Dublin. All those trips, Rob, I really do appreciate you having approved. Thank you for that. Anyway, I've asked Chris from Booz Allen Hamilton, he's a partner there, really to paint the picture of where is our industry. He's collected some original research, and we'll frame that up. Chris?
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. And I want to thank the smart ones for showing up this morning. I guess I also have to thank David. Although we've been traveling around the world looking at this issue of measurement communication, my presentations have never been at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning, so for that I'm grateful. I want to answer one question that I often get, and I just got it this morning, and then I'll dive into the presentations. People often ask, why is Booz Allen interested in this? And it's a question I'd love to get, and it's one that I'm really excited to share with everyone in the room. So yes, Booz Allen is a large global management consulting firm. Within that consulting firm, there are 750 strategic communications professionals. So we've basically had a large PR firm within a management consulting firm, which allows us to do a lot of different things as we practice management consulting. So for us, communications and measurement evaluation of communications is very important. We take a little bit of a different approach to that as strategic consultants and advisory services, and I'll share a little bit of that today. I think there's a lot that we can learn from how we approach measurement and how we approach communications. I will say that I don't come to this podium, I come to this podium having spent 12 years prior in large global PR firms. I was at Burson Marsteller, I was at Leishman Hillard, I ran my own agency for a few years, and prior to that I was in healthcare. I didn't realize, David, we shared a love for lobbying, but I was a lobbyist for a number of years in Washington as well. So that gives you some context for sort of why we're here, and what I wanted to do is just open with a very short video. Again, I was thinking of ways to make sure everyone was awake. That give you 90 seconds, and I'll just talk a little about some of the research findings.
Why do we treat the measurement and evaluation of communications as an add-on? How do we ensure that practitioners realize the power of communications to solve real business problems and track impact? Do our metrics show business results, or are we merely counting impressions? The reality is that over the past 3 years, communications and measurement budgets have taken a hit. In today's world, how do we prove we are doing more with less? Here are the facts. C-suite officials prefer outcome-oriented metrics, require articulation of actual value versus perceived value, stand by measurable objectives. Researchers and PR practitioners understand that we must be able to measure communications to solve real business problems. Believe we must establish a standardized approach to measurement throughout an organization, and feel we must break down the barriers to communications measurement. There is a disconnect between the C-suite's view and the practitioner's perspective regarding the value we offer. It is time to seize our opportunity to fill this gap, take our seat at the boardroom table, and influence business decisions. We are called to drive business results. When will we stand and deliver?
So I sort of set that stage because one of the things we've been doing, as David mentioned over the past year, is we took a look at the Barcelona principles, and I had the hypothesis that there may be some stark differences between some of the challenges that PR professionals and measurement evaluation professionals were facing globally. And I thought maybe the situation may be a little bit different in Europe than in Asia Pac or in the United States. So we went to set out to try to confirm or deny that. So over the last several months, and I have to advance my slides. we've gone and done, we fielded some directional research. The reason I say it's directional is that the research methodologies, there have been online interviews, and we're sort of taking this online interview data, and it's now sort of giving us a framework for what's going to be a much more robust and rigorous analysis within the industry through focus groups and one-on-one interviews and more surveying. So what we wanted to confirm are a couple key themes that we're seeing. So we did a similar study in Hong Kong. We went to Dublin, and then just prior to this conference, also surveyed many of you, and I'm going to share some of the results today. One of the interesting perspectives that we've looked at, however, is looking at some of the expectations of C-suite executives. So looking at CEOs and CMOs, and trying to understand whether or not there's a disconnect or what some of the tension is between what measurement and evaluation professionals are delivering or doing based on what their expectations are of what the power of communication is. And so I'm going to share some perspectives from those interviews as well, because I think that's important. So it's interesting, if you look at this next slide, there's a quote that I find particularly profound, and I'll read it. It says, "You have to move beyond obvious metrics such as media impressions, Facebook likes, and Twitter follows," although I do believe that's important to some extent. Those can provide a clue to your reach, but if you really want to show effectiveness, you need to decide which needle you want to move: sales, fundraising activity, or advocacy, and then measure your impact against that. And that's one of the things that we continue to hear repeatedly among some of the C-suite executives that we've been talking to globally. And it's the fact that there's no question that awareness or some of the things, some of the ways we're measuring campaigns now are okay and important. But to really given the challenging business environment that our executives are faced with, given some of the constraints relative to budget, our ability to link very clearly and directly to business problems, real business problems, which quite frankly in most cases are sales. I mean, sales to some extent is a real challenge for some companies, is where we need to evolve. The other piece I think that is interesting that we continue to see is, based on some of the feedback from the CEOs, the Barcelona principles are right on track. That is not a paid advertisement for David, by the way, but they are on track. They're on track because those are the 6 or 7 things that are most pressing when we think about how we need to evolve our industry. If we are able to operationalize and embrace these principles and put them in play, I think we're going to evolve not just our industry but our clients in ways that they haven't been before. I'd say and one of the things that's a little surprising here in the third bullet is that although PR practitioners note that engagement, and engagement is an important, and it's a best practice, and it is one way to demonstrate effectiveness, we still tend to, when pressed, we still fall back on impressions, which I find it's very curious to me, and I'll talk a little about why I think that happens, but I think that gets us into a little bit of trouble to my way of thinking. So again, there are 4 other insights here that I think are just worth noting, and we'll share copies of this presentation, but the fact that our measurement should be outcome focused. But the third bullet here is one that's interesting, is that as relative to expectations, I think the advertising world has done a very good job of demonstrating the importance and effectiveness of advertising. And in fact, there's a high appreciation of that. But what we're seeing is there's also an appreciation of the fact that to some extent, and I think advertising, there's a role in advertising, there's an absence of objectivity. And we all get that, I think. And I think our C-suite executives realize that I need a balance. I need a balance between public relations and communication and advertising. But what I need to be able to stand behind it and measure it. So I think the expectations are changing a bit. So I think our timing is unique as we try to look at how to seize on that and how to drive and shape the industry moving forward. There's some similarities, and I talked about a few of them, that we saw across these 3 global geographies. And I think the one is that there was a loud cry for the need to support business decisions. I don't think that there's any shocker there. The 2 things here, and the economy has had a negative effect. I thought that may be more geographical, but it seems across these geographies, the economy has had a fairly significant impact on PR and measurement buckets. And I have a slide that goes into some detail about that, and I'll share some insights around that. But the last 2 bullets here, I think, are ones that we should think through. One is there's a great need for a common ROI definition. So I think our colleagues want to understand, or want us to speak in unison about what a return on investment is relative to PR and measurement in that. And then there's a need for a standard set of metrics. And I think there is a little bit of absence of continuity around how we measure the impact of communications programs. So to dive in to some of the specific results from October, we asked the question of PR professionals, what's the biggest challenge to measuring the impact of the value of public relations? So this word cloud is interesting to me, and the two things here that come out that are problematic for me, I'd say, is one, that's cost. And I've seen cost across geography, and the reason why cost is a problem for me is because, I dug into this a little deeper and trying to understand, because I have not met an executive who does not pay for that which is valuable. And I see this as enormously valuable. But what's happening is how we're talking about measurement and evaluation communication. What we're seeing is, and in diving deeper in one-on-one interviews, is our colleagues are asking for a budget for measurement evaluation. Right? So we'll sell in a communication campaign, and then when that's sold in, you'll say, oh, and by the way, I need more money to do measurement and evaluation. That is absolutely absurd. There's no reason whatsoever that I would ever think about asking anyone for measurement budget, because I believe you can't do effective communication without measurement and evaluation. It's the same thing. It's the same activity. So I believe that if we take an evidence-based approach to communication, then measurement's baked into it. Right? So when I dug behind the cost thing, I said the onus is less on our clients or less on the C-suite if we're not understanding it. It's much more on the part of the practitioner and our ability to really see the close connectivity between what we do in the practice, the art and science of communication, and actually how we deliver that, which I believe measurement really is at the very core of that. The set of standards also continues to come up, and that for us suggested there's a real need. There's a need for data. There's a need for guidance. Not all practitioners are created equally. So I think, whether you're a director of a PR shop in a hospital up in Northern California, or you're in New York City for a large agency, I think we need to try to figure out how we develop and push out a set of standards. The other piece here on the second word cloud, which I think is also fairly exciting, is what do you believe are the greatest barriers to the adoption of standardized research techniques for measurement PR? One is the lack of knowledge, the absence of standards, communication barriers. But the knowledge piece for me is interesting. And I'd say about 8 months ago, we were giving a talk on some data, and it became clear that this issue is so complex, and it's big enough, and it's thorny enough that it probably warrants a global education campaign, some type of platform to arm and empower not just members of AMIC and PRSA and those practicing communications, but also businesses and corporations and clients everywhere. I think we need to. I think we're at the point where we need to sound the alarm a little bit in a global education awareness effort, which we've been continuing to think about how best to do that. And I think we have some ideas that we'll share about what makes sense from that regard. So we dove a little deeper and asked a question around the importance of PR measures. So on a scale of 1 to 10, we asked how important are the following that they're well understood across the profession. And it's no secret, and I think David mentioned the very first principle was the comment on setting measurable objectives. Measurable objectives is what I think we all sort of intuitively know to do at the outset, but it's beyond that. It's been our experience that as we practice communications, we don't really get into talking about campaigns, whether it's media or awareness or change of perception, until we really understand and define what a client problem is. So I almost say, as part of our education, as part of our call to action, is we need to spend more time as a profession diagnosing problems. Because if we're able to diagnose a problem effectively, I believe in the power of communications. I believe that communication can solve most business problems. Most business problems I think we can solve. And we see that in our practice at Booz Allen today. What may start as a big a data analytics challenge or an IT technology challenge for a company, oftentimes in the beginning, middle, or end, there's a big need for communication, which is why we have 750 folks working across Booz Allen doing just this, which I think is very exciting. Another interesting question is how important are the following that these criteria are well understood across the profession. And I think, again, it's interesting, the notion of sponsorships are important. I think that Sponsorships are good because, and I see the value of them, but what's challenging is it's oftentimes very difficult to quantify what companies get beyond awareness. And I know that. I can remember when I was doing work at Burson, and we had quite a few sponsorships that we were managing on behalf of our clients, and they're great. And they're great sometimes for these moments in time when there's a real spotlight on an event and activity. The sustainability oftentimes is a challenge, but it's also looking at and trying to quantify what you get. So as important as sponsorships are and have been, I do think that as we think about measurement, as we think about business problems, I almost think we need to rethink some of the tools that we use to drive our communication and public relations efforts. Okay, so attribute asset assessment. So the question we pose is, how much do you agree or disagree with the following statements? And it's interesting that we continue to see consistently, and it really came clear here in San Francisco, was the need for a common set of definitions around ROI, the language of PR measurement needing to be connected better to C-suite expectations. I think it's something that we didn't set out to uncover or find out, but that continues to be something we hear. And what we've heard from PR professionals is there's just not an understanding. They don't understand the importance of it. What I think that really means is their expectations, we may not be able to meet their expectations. So I think there's an expectation that we can do so much with communication campaigns, and we need to stand behind that. But we're not talking about the power of communications that way when we're engaging our C-suite officials. So I think we need to sort of galvanize around that and make a decision whether or not we're going to be able to do that. We looked at challenges and barriers to measurement. And again, I think staff resources consistently across the board, and I get that. And I think that is a challenge, and I think some of our colleagues are really struggling with how to do that. And it's interesting to hear some of the more innovative tools and resources and dashboards and technologies that are being created by some of the measurement companies in order to try to augment some of that relative to some of the staff resources issues as well. There's another piece here I'm trying to look at. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. My eyes are bad here, right? So hang on. I borrowed David's glasses. And again, that the fact that there's no effective tool to measure the impact, I struggle with that because I don't know that we can create an effective tool. And the reason I don't think we can create one tool is because every client's problem is different. So I struggle, and we hear this a lot, and I warn us against trying to create this silver bullet or holy grail. If we can do these two things, that's just not true. And it would create expectations that we would not be able to deliver against that. So rather than looking for the tool, let's try to diagnose the problem and believe in the power of communication to solve that problem. Now, we may need to open the aperture a bit on what communication is, right? So and media is an important part of that, but there's stakeholder engagement, there's brand and reputation communications. So there are so many tools and resources we have at our disposal. I think we have to evolve the thinking of our clients relative to what we can do. And I think an interesting piece is how we practice this at Booz Allen. So we don't do a lot of media relations. I don't do media outreach. But we do communication. And it's not that I don't think media is a great tool and a platform for driving communication, but oftentimes it's not. It is one of 4 or 5 strategies that I need to put in place to move the needle against the business problem. And it rarely is the headline. It's rarely the headline. And I don't lead, and we don't really lead with media. And I know that there's an evolution that's occurring also within various PR firms that's also not necessarily the lead. But I think we need to evolve our thinking and empower our teams with much more at their disposal to be able to do so much more than just that. So this is a really exciting, I think it's exciting, but digital media. And I think, again, it was mentioned earlier, the velocity of change within our industry is so profound, but also the dynamics are changing. And what I mean by that is the way information is moving is transforming our business right before our eyes. Information moves so quickly, which means that that consumers engage and experience brands in ways that they may not have ever been able to do just 5-6 years ago. And if you think about brand, and if brand really is an experience, and it's an experience that sits at the intersection between expectation and promise, then it's more and more difficult, more and more challenging for us to manage that. But I would say that there's a lot of excitement among the C-suite, a lot of excitement among professionals around what to do with digital communications, because it's no longer a trend. This is in fact the new way that communication occurs. But what's happening is we're being really leaned on to go far beyond likes and awareness and clicks. And I remember a time when we were just so excited, back when really when the internet sort of first became a resource for us in communication, just to have someone go to a website was like, this is like hooray, we'd have a parade. Now it's a given, right? So it's I'm probably dating myself, but I'd say what we're expecting digital communication to do now is to shape opinions. And not only are we expecting to shape opinions and form sentiment, but now we're being expected to demonstrate evidence of that. And I think that's actually a great thing, because I do believe that we can do that. I do believe that we can gather that information, especially given the level of intimacy our users have with things like mobile devices, and I think there is a way for us to really lean into digital communication differently. I know that this is a really big part of what David and the AMEC team are trying to do relative to ROI. But I would say, similar to the investments at Ketchum, we are very focused in communication analytics at Booz Allen, and one of the primary areas we're focused on is digital communication. And because there is not, that I have found, that we found, a real effective set of tools and solutions around measuring that, we're building it. So we're building our own capability to determine how we actually measure the impact of digital communication. And here's what I mean, and here's what's different. I think that Focus, Incision, I think those are fantastic companies that have a real important role for us. But what we're getting asked to do more of is to do much more of the interpretive analysis of that data. And not just interpret and analyze it, but then to provide a set of recommendations to our client. And not just make a set of recommendations and then deploy staff to implement. Right? That's what we do best as communication professionals. That's what our jobs are. So what you have to look at, how do you marry analytics and data to actually boots on the ground? And I think that's some of the things, that's some of the thinking. When you talk about an evidence-based approach to communication, that's where the power of analytics is incredibly profound. And I think that's where we're headed. And I think, again, the expectations are being shaped that way as well. So, and again, that's where I'd also say, from our standpoint, there's a need for partnering, collaborating very differently. Again, a reason why Booz Allen's here. We don't purport to be, we're not a PR firm, and we're never going to be a PR firm. But I think when we partner together with PR firms and measurement companies, which we do very regularly, the impact on our clients and the impact on programs and the impact on big social issues, we're even that much more successful at solving tougher problems. Okay. A few more slides, and I think this is it's the importance of competencies, and I think that this is a conversation we're going to have over the course of the day. But I do think one of the things I'm hoping you may have heard come out today is not that we need to transfer blame, and our business is so complex that no one understands it. It's more, I believe, we need to own what we own. We need to own our role in how we're talking about and how we perceive and how we believe in measurement, evaluation, and communication differently. So I do think that there's some real value, and we're seeing a need and a call out for help and for a set of competencies. And I think that it's interesting to see that there is 90+% of respondents, and this is across the board, this is not just the U.S., are asking for a set of competencies that they can hang their hat on as they look at driving their communication efforts. So I think we need to figure that out, and we need to determine what those are. We need to push them out. So then we just looked at some broad questions around the impact of the economy. It's probably no surprise that the economy over the last 3 years has been a challenge. And it's had a fairly negative, it has had a positive effect on our business, had a somewhat negative effect on our business. However, I would say this. I have not, and we have not, found a client who, when we are engaging around solving a business problem, where budget has been an issue. It's just not an issue, especially in today's environment. And I sell communication strategies, so very similar to what you all do as well. And measurement is not an add-on; it's right there in front of. In fact, measurement for us has been the secret weapon for driving our communications business. And our ability to lead with measurement and metrics has absolutely been a differentiator for us as well. So I do think that as challenging as the economy is, and I don't think we're going to go back to the days of 4 and 5 years ago when money, and I don't know that this was ever the case, where there was all this money falling off trees for communications campaigns. I mean, it was okay. But so I think that our business has just changed. Right? So if we look back in the last 3 years, it's not just about the economy. Right? The economy has been a problem, but the way information moves has also been an evolution, and it's also changed the expectations of consumers and corporations. So today's environment is our environment for tomorrow, and we need to determine how we respond to that. It's not as though we get this radical transformation and a turnaround in the economy and everything is great. I don't think that's going to be the case for us. I think that could help in certain pockets and certain segments, those industries that may have been hit particularly hard. But I do think, relative to the conversation today, our business is also changing. It's not going to go back to where it was before. So we separated the question on economy, the impact of the economy, both on PR campaigns and also on measurement, because again, we're trying to determine how closely aligned practitioners are connecting communications with evaluation, and the impact is very similar. But I would tell you, right, so if we're being honest, one of the things we do see is that when pressed, our colleagues will drop the measurement, and they'll just go to the communication campaigns. That's it. I mean, we see that, and that's unfortunate, because I think we don't do ourselves any favors when we do that. So I think we need to stand tall and make a determination about what's going to stay and what's going to go, and it's all one program. So a couple key findings. I'm happy to entertain any questions if time permits. And you can see these, but I'd say our practitioners see a lot of challenges around the value of implementing the value of PR and implementing campaigns. Not the least of which being limitation on staff and budget and a general lack of understanding. But again, as big as these challenges are, I do not think they're insurmountable. And there are certainly those of you in the room and companies who are not here and practitioners who are managing through this just fine. I think this tells us that we need to determine what those best practices are and how we align and partner differently and think about our business differently so that we can continue to advance the profession. We saw the economy, the negative impact of the economy. I shared my perspective on what I think that's going to do for us moving forward. The economic situation does not concern me too terribly, quite frankly, as it relates to this conversation. I think it's an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us because, as you saw in the opening, highly dynamic 90-second video, we're being asked to do more with less. And I believe that we can. I think we absolutely can. We have to decide, however, that we want to do that. I'd say it's interesting that there's a perception that within the next 5 years, over 90% of those surveyed, and this is also consistent globally, of public relations professionals indicate that there's a need for the development of a set of standards. And this, I did not expect this to be, I sort of thought this, when we looked at this first, we thought this may have been a little bit of an outlier. Maybe just a little specific to Asia-Pac is when we first saw the cry for standards. But it came up even louder when we went back to Europe for Dublin and even louder here in the U.S. So I do believe that there's a need for a host of reasons, all of which we've discussed, for some standards in our business. And again, a desire for more effective measurement is creating the need for measuring ROI and capturing true business impact. And it's tough, and I do think it's very difficult to stand before a C-suite executive and say, I understand you have, slumping sales numbers in these particular geographies or in these zip codes, and through the communication committee, we can change that. But if we're able to link our campaigns to modest and even small changes in market share and growth, I think it's only going to benefit us. And I do believe if we look at our business differently, we can do that. So having said that, I think as an industry we need to do a few things, and hopefully you've heard some of that, and I think today is a good step in a continuous journey that AMEC and PRSA have been leading for us, and it's one is we need to change the way we communicate and present the value of our business. We need to incorporate measurement in our mission and objectives, but also in the very fabric of how we practice communication. I think we need to use an evidence-based approach in a real way to demonstrate value, you know, around the objectives we're trying to drive for our clients. I mean, evidence, when presented with the evidence, it's undeniable. And the impact of our campaigns and a lot of the work you all are doing is absolutely undeniable. But we need to stand behind that and gather that evidence early. And when pressed, there's no choice to make between do I do communication or do measurement. Then you don't do a campaign, because you set yourself up for failure. We can't ever deliver, to my way of thinking, for a client or a company if we're forced to make that choice. And it may sound harsh, but I did believe that in fact to be true. And as a call to action, so here's what I would hope you know, that all of us stand behind, and Booz Allen is absolutely ready and prepared to be in this journey with you, is we need to reframe the discussion. We need to seize an opportunity that we think stands before us for more understanding and insights, and utilize communication as a tool for true problem solving. But again, it's meet the demand for data-driven campaigns. There is a demand for data-driven campaigns. We hear that. We heard that loud and clear. Where we're going next is, as I mentioned in the outset, is to try to do a much more robust analysis of a more integrated research effort to try to dive deeper into these with more targeted interviews with global executives on this, and then a more robust research effort around many of you in the room. But I think what we have is directional, and I think it's important, but it's actually informed and shaped our thinking. And hopefully it's been helpful to you to hear that this morning. So I don't know, David, if there are time for one or two questions, but with that, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Are there a couple of questions?
Hi. Oh, I think they're the same. I think if even, we do a lot of work in the nonprofit sector, so I don't see that anything we discussed today is any different. So you have real business objectives, because it's not just as awareness is important as well for nonprofits, and I've served and I have served on many nonprofit boards, but there's also a call to action, right? And the call to action oftentimes is donate money or participate or call your congressman or whatever it may be. So we have an opportunity. You're running a business as much as it is a nonprofit, and I think we can measure the impact of some of the calls to action and the impact of the awareness campaigns. What I would challenge us to do is not stop at awareness. Awareness is not enough. It just isn't. And there was a time, and those were good days when it probably was, but it's no longer that. So I think I would zero in on what are the 2 or 3 things what are the toughest problems that your organization's facing today, whether is it a sloping membership, is it dollars that are down, whatever the problems are, and then hitch your communication efforts to those problems. I can guarantee you, if we really clarify those problems, you could be a big part of solving them. I don't see it any different for a nonprofit. Because I'll also tell you, a lot of our business is in the federal government. And the federal government doesn't necessarily have, which is a really exciting space, a very dynamic place for us to work in from a communication standpoint. They're not necessarily selling products. They're not really worried about a bottom line. They're selling ideas. They're selling programs. They're doing a lot of changing of behavior. And the data and the way we practice communication in the federal government is no different than if we were working in the commercial or private space. It's really finding the problem to solve. So thank you for the question. Anything else? Yes, sir. So, if I understand the question, have we seen a difference in B2C or B2B in the response to the questionnaire, or in how we're actually, in some of the recommendations? B2C. Yeah, no doubt. Again, and I think the consumer is it's sort of good news, bad news story. In fact, that consumers becoming more important, and we're getting challenged to segment our consumer base differently. But also, as consumers, the expectations of consumers are different. We have a more empowered consumer. I believe that the way consumers are interacting with brands today, as different as it is, just look at the evolution of that in the last 3 years, is fundamentally transforming traditional business models across the board. I no longer have to walk into a store. I no longer have to engage with an employee of a company in order to experience the brand. I have the I invite brands into my personal space through my mobile device, and I could also uninvite you the same way. So I have a lot of choice and an incredible amount of power. So B2C is really becoming an interesting challenge, but I'd also say it's a real opportunity. And it's an opportunity because we've often talked about how we segment our targeted communication efforts. We talk a great deal about that. We go into, and I know that Dave and his team have lots of rigorous psychographic profile data on segments, whether it's women or teens or tweens or rural, whatever, and I think that's important. But we also then need to lean into that and say, then how am I then going to engage a particular segment, and how am I going to change a behavior? Because I think these perceptions are being shaped, informed literally in minutes. So from the brand communication, reputation side of the house, it's tough. Yes, sir.
You had talked about the Allen, that's your own internal effort to create digital media measurement.
Sure.
Can you share some more details on that? Are you looking to commercially make or run it, like I said in our budget?
So did everyone hear the question? So there are no plans to make a run of Decision Focus. We partner with them quite a bit, and we find that they're good partners. What we are doing is we have a fairly robust analytics capability. It is one of 4 big pillars if you look at the capabilities that drive our business. And we believe that the same analytics we use in supply chain logistics can be used at managing and building brands. So, for example, if I'm able to do modeling and simulation, imagine the power of BP if we were able to look downstream about the impact of a catastrophe a year before it actually happened. And we believe that we have, given the diversity of our business, given the robustness of how we approach data analytics, that we believe we can apply some of those methodologies to communication and actually transform the way we deliver and measure communications programs. So again, that is just one example of what we'd like to do. But the other piece I think is important is what I talked about earlier, from evolving from just the data and pulling in data for data's sake. It's marrying data and advisory services, which is something that we think is incredibly powerful and not happening with the level of regularity. And I think that as a consulting firm, we're fairly uniquely positioned to do that just because of scale. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry. I know we have to go, right?
Yeah.
All right, we have to go. But can we have one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Last question, and then David's kicking me out. So the question was how much evaluation is needed or recommended, and I'd say it's I'm not trying to not answer the question. I think it absolutely depends on the problem you're trying to solve. I think it's tough to say, and I know there are standards around what makes something statistically valid, and I think I think we sort of get that. But relative to the way we practice communication, it really depends on the target audience I'm trying to move and what the problem I'm trying to solve is. So once we determine what that is, then I think we can then build the measurement and evaluation program that best meets that need. But I don't think there's a silver bullet to that, unfortunately. Sorry. All right.
Rob, thank you guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much.